Hello and welcome to Prairie Pulse. Coming up later in the show, we'll hear a musical performance from Nita Vello. But first, Matt O'Lean got a chance to sit down with a special guest.
And my guest is Gigi Wood. She's the public information editor for the Fargo Forum in Fargo. How are you doing, Gigi?
I'm doing great.
Thanks for being here. We're going to talk about a couple phenomenal books that you've written. I'm going to hold these up. Iowa Life Changing, which is an expansive, great book on Iowa, and then Corridor Rising, a decade of reinvestment after the 2008 floods of Iowa. So these are phenomenal books, gorgeous looking books.
Oh, thank you so much.
And let's talk about those. But first, why don't you tell folks a little about yourself, where you're from originally, and how you got to Fargo.
Sure. Yes. Well, I grew up in Iowa, grew up in Des Moines, and spent the last 17 or 18 years in Iowa City, which is just a couple hours east of Des Moines. And I've spent most of my career as a journalist, print journalist, and worked at several papers, including, the wire service, the AP, and small local dailies, magazines. I spent 7 years at a business newspaper. And a couple years ago, I think it was 2014, I moved to Fargo. And that was after I'd reached a point in my journalism career where I wanted to try something new and wanted to further my education. And so I went back to school for web development and did a 9-week full-time boot camp in web development at the University of Iowa. And really decided that I wanted to do writing with web development. And so there were a lot of opportunities here in Fargo in that arena. There are a lot of companies that partner with Microsoft and do that kind of similar work. So there were lots of writing and / web development positions up here, and I had a best friend here. And so I came to visit and really loved downtown and gave it a shot, gave it a try, and here I am, and now working for the Forum.
Okay, let's talk about the first book, Iowa Life Changing, which is really about the state itself. How did you write this book? A massive project, it sounds like. What gave you the idea to start this book?
Sure. The publisher, Julia Evans, came to me and asked me to write it. I had known her most of my life as just a mentor and a friend of the family, and she was aware of my journalism work, and she needed someone to produce this book for her who she could trust, and someone who could tell a story to people unfamiliar with the subject. And that's really what brought me into the project. So I'd written some various journalistic stories about communities in Iowa that people didn't know a lot about, and that had, I guess at the time, viral wasn't a word, but there are a couple of those stories that kind of went viral. And so she knew of that work and needed someone that she could really trust with a project of this size and magnitude, and it sure was. And so I just had the great honor to be asked, and definitely said yes.
And the photographs are remarkable. Talk about maybe some collaborators that helped with the photographs.
Sure, we used a variety of photographers from across the state. A lot of them had worked for their local papers in the area. A lot of them are just artistic photographers, and we did a call out throughout the state, and there are various ways to get in touch with that grapevine of photographers, and a lot of them stood up and contributed. And I think in both books I have maybe 1 or 2 photographs of my own that I took along the way, and but yeah, just amazing work there. And that was really an important part of both publications, was to have a very strong image presence. Uh-huh. And the thought was, for both of them, not everyone reads, and we wanted to have a book in both cases that was very accessible to the public, and if they just wanted to flip through and look at the images, that they would learn the story from that as well. So, there's a lot of story to tell with both of those situations, and not everyone has time to read, especially the first one is about 500 pages, and so knowing that not everyone would read that many pages on the state of Iowa, we really wanted to make sure that we were showcasing the state and telling the story through those photos. But also, I think that what you'll see in the national portrayal of Iowa, especially through the caucuses, are images that aren't always flattering. And that's just par for the course with national media. Iowans are used to that. But it gave the state a turn to really kind of brag about itself and show, hey, we have some really beautiful parts of the state and a lot to show off. So.
What is Iowa like for our viewers? We have, North Dakota viewers, Manitoba, Western Minnesota. Is it like North Dakota? Is it different, similarities, differences? What is the state like if you met someone and they didn't know?
Sure. Well, I think there are significant differences, but a lot of similarities. It's all the Midwest, and so friendly people. People are very involved and very devoted to their communities, like they are in North Dakota. The University of Iowa has a huge following for the Iowa Hawkeyes, similar to the Bison, so there's a lot of pride there. Iowa is a smaller state with 3 million people, and so it's larger than North Dakota, but the landmass is smaller.
Right.
I think that you'll see that I hear from a lot of people who have traveled through Iowa but not stopped that there's not much to look at, and that's a pretty general criticism of the state. The interstates go through the flattest, least attractive parts of the state for a reason, and through a lot of farmland, which is our bread and butter economy. So there's not a lot to see as far as skyscrapers through a lot of that journey, but in the Northeast, there are the most beautiful limestone bluffs that rivers run through, and there's a lot of wilderness and wildlife, a lot of trees. I miss that a lot, being in the grassland, prairie land, and a lot of wildlife. But Des Moines has become a really huge hub of activity with 1 million people plus. Lot going on there, the capital of the state, and it's one of the insurance capitals of the country, so that's another major industry in Iowa. But I think you'd find overall, a lot of similarities with North Dakota as far as the people and the connection to their home state.
Yeah, that was my next question. What other businesses, presidential, they come there for the caucuses, it's like everyone grows corn. That's obviously not
Right.
true. You mentioned insurance. What are some other key industries in Iowa?
Sure. And there's more than corn, there's soybeans
Yep.
too. That's big. In some years that's more than corn, but so insurance, healthcare is a major industry there. Lots of healthcare related insurance companies, so that's a really major industry sector in Iowa. Education is a major force in Iowa. It's kind of what the state was built on and has been important to Iowans for more than 100 years, and people take a lot of pride in the level of education in the state. So that's a big driver. And there's a big push lately, I'd say the last decade or so, for small business, entrepreneurial startup businesses, and that's taken a foothold throughout the state too. There's a lot of, just from the farmer who is good with their hands, who creates their own business with building molds for farm equipment, to the latest in biomedical research at the University of Iowa. So it's quite a diverse array of industry. I think that you'll find that one of the key things that happened in Iowa was the recession, the farm recession in the 80s. And it took over a decade to really recover from that. And most of the state leaders decided at that point, once the recession was tapering off, we need to diversify our economy. We cannot be beholden to just ag. And so there was a real concerted effort to diversify that. And I think the state's done that pretty well, pretty successfully.
Is the population becoming more diverse, or is it still a fairly white state?
It's a very white state.
Yes.
Yeah. You'll find a lot of diversity in the college towns. And when I lived in Iowa City, I would consider it a great day when I heard more than 2 languages. And there's students from, all over the world, and definitely a burgeoning Hispanic community. And that's really important to not only ag, but manufacturing. Those groups are really important to the workforce. So you'll see a lot of the Latino population and great food that goes along with that.
Now, what is Iowa like when the candidates start coming through in front of the caucuses? And we're going to have Democratic candidates announcing, I think, within the next month or 2 months. I saw an article about what's the mayor of Los Angeles doing in Iowa, Eric Garcetti.
Right.
What is that like when they descend on Iowa every 4 years?
It is an amazing, magical circus, and it gets pretty old after going through it. It takes about 2 years of people going through there and trying to make a mark, and it's a lot of fun. It gets pretty annoying when all the streets get shut down and different candidates, especially incumbents, come through town and with their protection. But Iowans take great pride in the caucuses, and they do a lot of homework. And you'll find that candidates will go to a lot of these small town cafes and coffee shops and talk. One of the most notable ones is the Hamburg Inn in Iowa City, and I've seen several candidates there. And so you have this guy in a very fancy suit standing amongst retirees and nurses and teachers, and sometimes you'll have the League of Women Voters there and they're knitting, and you have this guy who's trying to be impressive and use fancy big words, and that doesn't go very far. And it's a really interesting litmus test for a lot of politicians who are just starting out. But Iowans take the job of vetting those candidates very seriously, and those meetings, those town hall meetups and coffee shop appearances are highly attended, and you'll find big crowds, and everybody wants to hear about what's this guy got to say and who's going to be different, and let's check him out and check out his background or hers.
Her,
and,
right?
Yeah. And is this person worthy of moving on? So I think Iowans would prefer it if the rest of the country didn't always follow their lead. I don't think that's ever the intention. It's just, here's the first milestone, and this is what we thought at this point. But, do your own research too.
Right. Let's move to your second book,
Sure.
Corridor Rising, which is about the Iowa floods of 2008. We've experienced that here as well with Grand Forks in '97. What happened in 2008? What were the convergences of various factors that caused this?
Sure. Heavy snowfall all winter, multiple major snowstorms over the winter, and I believe starting in about December, but going through the end of March, which is unusual for Iowa. Iowa's usually coming out of its winter in February, and March is really spring, so that was unexpected. That's when a lot of people, their attention was heightened, and people started taking real stock in what's happening with river levels. 1993 was Iowa's most famous flood that a lot of people recall, but this one was bigger, and I think people learned from '93 what to kind of look for, and there were a lot of those markers there that were very familiar, uncomfortably so, and then the rainfall started for the spring, and it just really didn't let up. And I remember thinking that May, wow, we really haven't gotten a break from the rain for weeks and weeks, and this is troublesome. And so to just have an everyday person notice, that's noticeable. But there were several officials across the state who were watching this very closely, and they were very aware. So, but those were the steps leading up, and then there were a flurry of major thunderstorms that rolled through the Midwest in late May, early June, and that really capped it off. I mean, after that, at that point, the ground was so saturated, it just really couldn't stand any more rain, and that's what we got.
What cities, where was the damage the most?
Mm-hmm. So the rain came, and there's several major rivers that run through Iowa, and the storms came down through north central Iowa and then followed down through east and south. And the major city hit was Cedar Rapids, and then it went down to Iowa City, where the University of Iowa is. And so you had an entire industrial section, the entire downtown of Cedar Rapids completely decimated by the flood. And then in Iowa City, the University of Iowa, you know, a premier Big Ten school, lost their entire arts campus and several dozen campus buildings in just a couple months before classes were about to begin. So,
what's the state done in the 10 years since to make sure this doesn't happen again, and to rebuild as well? Kind of a two-pronged question there.
Sure. Well, not enough, and
Okay.
Iowans are very aware of that. That's an ongoing conversation.
There's not a diversion, nothing like that in place.
There have been extensive changes and implementations made since the flood. But in Cedar Rapids especially, I think residents are really hungry for more of a diversion plan, flood walls on both sides of the river, things like that, really substantial structures put in place. What has happened since the flood in the last 10 years is a lot of engineering, a lot of let's remove structures from the riverbanks and move things back and create green space so that the riverbanks can absorb more of that flood. That's been really successful. Just a couple years ago, Cedar Rapids had historic levels of flooding again, and all of the steps that they had taken in the past decade really made a difference and held the waters back, and they were able to avoid flooding because of that. But everyone wants more, of course. There's been extensive flood walls built piecemeal in Cedar Rapids along the riverbank to protect downtown, but there's not one long, extensive wall, you know, from start to finish. And I think a lot of people would like to see that.
Again, I'm sure you want to credit some photographers that helped with this book as well.
Sure, the list
Yeah.
is endless.
Yeah.
We had quite a few journalists who had been really on the ground writing and covering the flood. There's a well-known photographer who's doing a great job, William Buckets. And then there are journalists who blog and cover the flood for different newspapers, like Cindy Haddish did an amazing job. And they were really able to, at the time and since then, get into individual historic buildings and really take a historical record of the changes that have happened since the flood and the flood damage itself. So,
What's been the reaction to the books?
great reaction. They weren't created to sell single copies, but I still hear about the Iowa book and the first one, Life Changing, and I still see it on coffee tables at businesses, and still have people ask me for copies, even though that book was created in 2005 and is really out of date. There's been a lot that's happened since then, but I think it did a good job of showcasing, what Iowans can be proud of, and so there's been quite a positive response to both. And I was just reading a review of Corridor Rising last night. since that's come out, people have really been astonished, and I don't mean by the writing by any means, but I think that there hasn't been a publication that really has tracked not only the damage, but the amazing recovery. There was, throughout that Cedar Rapids, Iowa City region, $6.6 billion worth of damage, and that's a lot to recover from. And city business leaders have really poured a lot of money into reinvestment, and it's been astounding, the change.
We're out of time. If people want to get copies of the books, can they? How can they do that?
There are some available on Amazon and through the Corridor Rising website, through the Corridor Business Journal. So,
okay.
Yeah.
Thanks, Gigi.
Yeah.
Thanks for being here.
Thank
Great
you for
books.
having me.
Wonderful having Gigi Wood here on Prairie Pulse. Stay tuned for more.
Nita Vello is a Minnesota native and an accomplished singer and songwriter. She's also had publishing contracts, performed jingles, and worked as a demo vocalist for many notable musicians in Nashville and LA. She appreciates performing on both small and large stages because music has been her passion since childhood.
Packed up your car for California, with tears in our eyes we said goodbye. I was wishing that you could stay forever, and I could keep you closely in my sight. It's not easy to say be careful, and it's not easy to say it'll be alright. It's not easy to say God be with you when I'm gonna miss you all the while. Whoa. Remembering back when you were younger, dream catchers and antlers on the wall. I still have the artwork that you made me, and a box of clothes that would fit a doll. But it's not easy to say be careful. No, it's not easy to say it'll be alright. And it's not easy to say God be with you when I'm gonna miss you all the while. And I pray for you, my sweet child. Now looking at pictures that you text me, and waiting for your call most every night. Need us, but this mother's heart still holds you tight. And it's not easy to say be careful. No, it's not easy to say it'll be alright. It's not easy to say
Well, that's all we have on Prairie Pulse for this week. And as always, thanks for watching.
Funding for Minnesota Legacy programs are provided by a grant from the Minnesota Arts and Cultural Heritage Fund, with money from the vote of the people of Minnesota on November 4th, 2008, and by the members of Prairie Public.